Okay, so just a quick little follow-up on the last video on the PGL. First off, the obvious stuff. Yes, Homebrew does an average of 110% damage, not 120%. Don't know how I made that mistake, but YouTube doesn't really let you do any real editing to videos you've already uploaded, so here we are. And Incendiary does reduce both friendly fire and damage done to yourself, because it just reduces damage, which is very useful for blast jumping. It's also the only way to reduce self-damage on it, because friendly only works on teammates, not yourself. This is something that is so second nature to me at this point that I didn't even think to mention it. Next, I had people mentioning that you need to take a damage up to kill grunts consistently with RJ250. This is technically true, but only kind of. In a vacuum, grunts will sometimes survive base damage RJ250 shots, but only barely, only at the edge of the blast, and even so, not very frequently. And that only happens with single grunts. You don't really use PGL on individual grunts. You use your primary or turrets or whatever. You use PGL on groups, and against groups, RJ250 without damage ups does actually kill grunts consistently. This is because of heat spreading. Burning creatures in Deep Rock spread heat to other nearby creatures at a rate of 5 per second, which almost completely counteracts a grunt's cooling rate of 6 per second. They don't need to be touching or anything either. Medium creatures spread heat in a whole 2-meter radius, which is honestly pretty generous. With the way that grunts pathfind towards their target, it's very unlikely for a group of grunts to, first off, be close enough to each other that they all get caught in one PGL splash, but at the same time somehow not be close enough to spread heat. And even in the rare situation that that does happen, grunts still only survive if you also get quite unlucky with the burning tick rate. So, with both of those things combined, this is a vanishingly rare occurrence in actual play. That said, I do still take a damage up on RJ250 pretty frequently, but the reason I do that is to kill slashers faster. What about throwing incendiary rounds on Fatboy? Well, this isn't actually completely nuts, but it's not really good either. So, straight away, a limiting factor of this is that creatures have a maximum temperature of 100. Since incendiary rounds convert 50% of PGL's current damage stat to heat, it's inflicting 220 heat at least. But since most creatures can't actually take more than 100 heat, more than half of this is just wasted. You might be thinking, what about the creatures that can take more than 100 heat? Well, there's not a lot of them. You've got Dreadnoughts, which can't be ignited, you've got Patrol Bots, and you've got Nemesis. And Patrol Bots and Nemesis do actually technically still only have a maximum temperature of 100, which is also their ignite temp. But they have something called Temperature Change Scale, which scales down the amount of heat they take by unique values. Patrol Bots' scale is 0.6, so they effectively take 166.66 heat to ignite. Nemesis is more extreme, having a temperature change scale of 0.15, and thus taking an effective 666.66 heat to ignite.
It gets more and more conversation coming out of the Bible, and that's the mark of the beast. It's been discussed, there have been movies about it.
These are the only enemies that you actually have a reason to want to inflict over 100 heat at once. But Fatboy isn't good at overheating Nemesis, and it's not great against Patrol Bots either. It does overheat them, but it's a really expensive way to do that. Hyperprop also does it in just one shot, except Hyperprop gets to carry 11 shots instead of 5. And those shots travel in a fast straight line, making them much easier to aim. Once in a blue moon, you will get multiple Patrol Bots right next to each other, but it doesn't happen often. Keep in mind, Fatboy only increases the explosion radius by 1 meter, so even with the tier 4 radius mod, you still don't normally get to ignite multiple Patrol Bots. In general, Hyperprop is far better for igniting bots. As for non-bot enemies, they fall into one of two categories. 1. They die directly anyway, so there's no difference. Or 2. They take a bit less damage total, and it takes longer to do that damage. So, just in general, I think it's hard to recommend this mod on Fatboy over High Velocity. Also speaking of Fatboy, another couple things. First, Fatboy is really good against Omen Towers and Caretakers. Caretakers are the more relevant one because they don't show up randomly, so you can bring this to sabotage missions specifically for them. You can hit all of the vents with the blast at the same time if you're up high enough, and you don't need to take any of the radius mods to do it. This is a very fast and ammo efficient way to take down the vents. However, bear in mind that the HP of these vents scales a lot with player count. With 4 players, it's more than double the amount than with just 1 or 2. So don't expect to 2-shot these unless you're playing solo. In a full team, shooting these with Fatboy is still a nice time save, and if you're fine with NG chugging some resupplies, you can basically skip the vents phase. Second thing about Fatboy is, I've heard people say that friendly reduces the self-damage from the field. Maybe this was true at some point, but it's not true now, so don't try to cook yourself in the field with friendly on. That said, friendly does reduce the damage of the field against other players.
Hey, can I get your attention?